I really don't think things have gone to plan for Carl Froch. Let me put it this way. I never genuinely thought Carl Froch was going to retire after the George Groves fight. I didn't think that for two reasons. One, put simply, financials. Carl Froch is a guy who has only entered the mega echelons of boxing earnings in his last fight. He made, I would suggest, more money in his last fight than he probably did across the entire boxing career and all his previous fights. James Degale's getting $1.5 million to fight Anthony Durrell. Eddie Hearn was quoted as saying that Carl Froch got 10% of that to fight his brother Andre Durrell. And that gives some idea as to Froch's career earnings. Yes, don't get me wrong, he'll have had decent paydays along the way. I'm sure he got 1 or 2 million quid for the first Groves fight. I'm sure he got 2 or 3 million quid for the second Kessler fight. But it wouldn't surprise me if he made more money in the more recent Froch Groves fight than he did across his entire career. Now my point is this. Carl Froch is now a pay-per-view sensation in the UK. He's the biggest celebrity boxer that there is in the UK. I would say right now Carl Froch is a bigger draw than David Haye, than Tyson Fury, than Amir Khan. The list goes on. Right now he is as big as they come. His pay-per-view sales, I think, are at the top, and his earning potential comes along with it. Put simply, Carl Froch versus any decent opponent, James Degale, George Groves free, Andre Ward, Mikhail Kessler free, is probably a fight that can be made at Wembley Stadium. It's probably a fight, almost certainly a fight, that can go on Sky Box Office. You know, realistically, Carl Froch would be quitting the game at a time his earning potential is at an all-time high, should he quit now. And that's different if you're a Floyd Mayweather, who's earned substantially throughout the course of his entire career. But for Carl Froch, who is only just entering the mega earnings bracket, it seems strange to retire at this point. Secondly, I think Carl is a guy who is interested in legacy. I think he's a guy who's interested in celebrity. He puts himself out there. We've seen him do reality TV competition shows. We've seen him appearing on various TV programs. We constantly hear about him talking about his legacy and the level of opponents he's beaten throughout his career. For me, this is a guy who wants to do everything possible to further his name, both as a boxer and also outside the ring. And for Carl Froch, the best way of doing that is in another very big fight. Now, put simply, and I like Carl Froch. A few people have said that I hate on Carl Froch, but I really don't. I'm a fan of Froch. I do like him. He provides great entertainment. But put simply, Carl Froch is still somewhat in the shadow of Joe Calzaghe. In 50 years' time, when we're talking to our grandchildren about great super middleweights, for me, Carl Froch will be 1 or 2 minutes after Joe Calzaghe in that conversation. You know, I know people can question Calzaghe's legacy, but Calzaghe beat Kessler first time round. Calzaghe beat Bernard Hopkins 10 years before Bernard Hopkins retired. Calzaghe beat Roy Jones Jr. You know, Froch's list of opponents: Pascal, Durrell, Groves, Kessler, Ward, Abraham, Taylor. It's absolutely superb. It's absolutely superb. But the fact that he's got losses on his record, And the fact that it is hard to truly consider Froch the number one in his division if Andre Ward is active, for me makes it hard to consider him in the same breath as Calzaghe, who I think very much ruled the roost during his tenure at 168 and 175. Anyway, I'm digressing, I'll stick to the point. My point is, Froch is at a point now where his celebrity's at a high, his earning potential's at a high, his legacy's at a high. Does he really want to bow out when he's hit this peak? The difficulty is, he put all his eggs in one basket, the Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. basket. Andre Fonfora could potentially have retired both Chavez Jr. and Carl Froch when he landed that punch on Saturday night. Chavez Jr. is no longer the viable opponent for Carl Froch. The guy is a laughingstock amongst hardcore boxing fans. Some would go further and say that he's a disgrace. Carl Froch cannot step in the ring for a major Vegas pay-per-view showdown with a guy who's just been KO'd by Andre Fonfora. So where does this leave Carl Froch? Now the difficulty for Froch is, because he was very much on the basis that he was above titles, because he was more about the big fight with Chavez, he vacated his IBF belt. It is at this stage unclear in my mind whether Carl Froch is still the WBA regular champion or whether he will be stripped of that. I understand the WBA was sanctioning Froch Andre Ward for that, or mandating that, but that fight didn't go ahead. So it's quite possible that Carl Froch doesn't have a belt attached to his name. That creates some awkwardness. Certain fights like Degale Carl Froch are harder to sell if neither man has a belt attached to them. For a guy like Bernard Hopkins, who's looking to win a belt at 168, another guy who maybe is obsessed with legacy and wants to win another world championship, Froch is surely less of an attractive name without a belt attached to him. My point is, in waiting for Chavez, Froch has got a year older, and he's very much in the autumn of his career. He's got a year's worth of ring rust. And now, rather than being a unified champion, has no belts whatsoever. George Groves has got a big fight in the diary. James Degale has got a big fight in the diary. We're expecting Andre Ward to have a big fight in the diary very soon. Mikhail Kessler has retired. Chavez Jr. is no longer a viable option. My point is, has Carl kind of missed the boat a bit? In hindsight, should he not have fought James Degale and kept his IBF belt, and now be looking for a big pay-per-view showdown against Bernard Hopkins? Should Carl not have considered fighting Andre Ward and trying to catch Andre Ward with loads of ring rust? Would that not have been a more sensible plan? A loss to Andre Ward wouldn't necessarily affect Carl's resume, but I personally think if Froch went over to the States again and this time KO'd Andre Ward, then potentially he does fall into that all-time great category. So for me, Froch's future is very uncertain. I view him as a guy who does want to fight again. I don't necessarily believe the chat about him considering retiring. He looks like he's kept himself in shape, and I think the desire and the hunger is still there. I don't think he'll bow out just yet. But at the same time, with talk of pay-per-view, talk of Vegas, talk of international superstardom, he can't really come back in a fight against Rocky Fielding now. he's got to come back in an A-list fight. And right now, with Chavez having lost, I don't see that A-list fight available for Carl, if we assume that he wants to stay at £168. Perhaps the answer to the question is to hope and pray that James Degale wins a belt against Andre Degale, which I view as a very competitive fight. Get the strap with Degale, and then have Froch Degale at Wembley in the summer for the belt. Or, if Groves and Degale win, those guys fight at Wembley in a unification match with the understanding that Carl Froch fights the winner. A third fight with Groves or a third fight with Degale. Right now, I see those as Froch's options. And I know Froch brings a huge name, a huge following and a huge amount of money to a fight. Don't get me wrong. But if Carl Froch does have desire, and if Carl Froch does have a will and an urge to fight on, I think he needs the young lions, George Groves and James Degale, because I think they're his way back. Let me know your thoughts. As always, keen to discuss. Thanks for watching.